The Healing Spring Show, healing families and communities by breaking the stigma of addiction and expanding the scope of recovery. Now here's your host, John Edmondson.
Welcome back to the Healing Spring Show. So when we talk about recovery, we talk about therapy and healing. One of the most important things we need to look at is recovering from the shame that we might feel for the mistakes we've made or for the things that have happened to us. Today we have two experts. They're going to help us look at shame, how to recover from it, and accept ourselves unconditionally. We have Kelly Sevin, professor at UNT and director of programming at Healing Springs Ranch, and of course, Zen Andy here, who will be helping us today on acceptance and compassion. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having us. Good girl. Good girl.
So tell me, who do we have here?
So this is Andy. She is, we'll see how long she lasts, and there she goes.
Thank you, Andy.
She's my personal dog, and she is a therapy dog in training. And she's done a couple different classes, and she's been out to Healing Springs, and I'm calling this her internship, like all therapists have to go through. And she's learning how to be an emotional support dog, a therapy dog, animal-assisted therapy, and she's so calm and so loving. The clients so far have just soaked her up, and she soaks them up just as much, too.
Oh, they enjoy her. And I noticed I gave her the nickname she's starting to get there is a Zen Andy. So calm and so peaceful.
Yeah, and that's the thing. When she can sit next to a client and a client's feeling all kinds of different things, anxiety, anger, having her sit right next to them, she is able to co-regulate with them, and they can pick up on how calm she is and just gives them something else to focus on. Yeah. And then even petting her and just that motion can be really calming for people. It's calming for me, it's calming for the clients, and she's just very chill, very relaxed.
Yeah. So tell us about you.
So I am a marriage and family therapist. I studied at Richmond University in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and got my license soon after that. And I'm also a LCDC, licensed chemical dependency counselor, and also I'm certified in the Daring Way, which is Brene Brown's work, which is the shame work that I do all the time with the clients and the work that I love doing.
Yeah, we're definitely going to be talking about Brene Brown later out.
Yes.
Speaking of which, you want to give any shout-outs?
Definitely to Brene Brown. I have been following her work for many, many years. Her TED Talks were her first kind of big thing on the scene that I stumbled upon. Started using that with clients many years ago, and they ate it up. And I tell everybody, her work has changed my life personally and professionally. And so I started using her TED Talks in groups and reading her books and just soaking up so much of her work. And her TED Talks have hit millions and millions of viewers. And I joke that I'm probably only maybe 500,000 of those. But I think there's so much truth in the numbers of the viewers that she has. Just speaks to how hungry our culture is to really hopefully talk about this topic, but at least that can relate to shame. She talks about vulnerability and shame, and unfortunately, shame says to stay silent and don't talk about it, but her work being as big as it has become, I think speaks to there's such a hunger and a need for this topic and for us to be able to stop the stigma of shame as well as addiction and mental health and all these other things, and shame being such a driving force of those.
Yeah, and we see that all the time in therapy, people coming in from recovery, and they're trying to make that change, but then they have that stumbling block of, I don't want to share everything with you because you're going to start to judge me.
Right.
What would you say? So people are listening, they're watching, maybe they're walking the door to Healing Springs, or they're sitting at home and they're pondering recovery or treatment, or trying to think what to do, and they go, maybe I need some help, but I don't want anyone, my front forward facing, I'm good. People like me, they think I'm okay as I am. I'm afraid if really you know who I am, you're not going to like me anymore. What would you say to them?
Yeah, and that's the fear of shame. Shame says to stay silent, that if you share this part of yourself, somebody will judge you, abandon you, leave you, prove this belief that you're not good enough, not worthy enough. So we've got to step outside of that and take small steps sometimes, but lean into that vulnerability and really, really trust the process, get to know the team that's around you. Healing Springs, we have a wonderful team of therapists and support to help kind of bring down those barriers. And one of the conflicts, I guess, with shame is that it's a social construct. So we learn about shame in a social context. That's also how we heal from shame. I can't heal from shame on my own. I've got to share with somebody else. And it's empathy that can be such a huge healing force with shame. So sharing it with another human being, whether a therapist, a sponsor, a pastor, a loved one, a group of people. We do a lot of group therapy at Healing Springs, and a whole lot of healing from shame happens in that group context or a therapy session or a family session where you can share your story, share some of those really painful things. And it could be a stair-step approach. I mean, it could be, slowly we get deeper and deeper. But through sharing that and having love and support mirrored back and received well, that's when healing happens.
And you said something powerful. You said it's a social construct. What does that mean?
We learn about it in a social way. We learn that we are bad or different oftentimes when we're little kids, and that can grow, and it can be through all kinds of different experiences that we internalize this message. It could be explicitly said to us, you're worthless, you're not smart enough, why are you bringing home C's, why are you bringing home B's, what is this A minus? It could look like a whole lot of different things. In school, one of the biggest pieces is comparison. Comparison is devastating to our sense of self and our self-esteem. And
what does that look like, comparison?
Well, it could be anything. And unfortunately, one of the easiest ways to use comparison against ourselves is with social media. I can compare my life, all the good and bad that I know and I see, to somebody else's Facebook page that's only what they want to show. So I can see all the happy pictures of their family and look at these beautiful Easter morning pictures,
right, the selfies.
Exactly, and we don't know everybody else's struggles and hurts and pains and challenges because we all have them. But I can start to compare myself and say, well, I don't have 3 kids and 2 dogs and a doctorate, just all these different things. And the minute we start to compare ourselves, we are no longer grateful for what we have.
And we start to feel worse about ourselves at the same time.
Yes. So we start to judge, we compare, we think that because we don't have or we don't look like or we're not doing what somebody else does, that our shame just eats away at our self-esteem.
That makes a lot of sense. And there may be people right now that are comparing themselves to us in this moment as they watch us.
Sure.
And they're sitting 2 therapists in the room. They must have it all together. But what do you think? Do therapists in general, do they also have to look at their shame and look at their suffering and everything else? Because I bet there's some therapists out there watching that are like, well, they got it together, but I'm a hot mess. But what does it look like? What do you do to achieve that?
Yeah, I mean, every human being has our stuff, and I talk about shame buttons. That's kind of a way I've described it. And we all have shame buttons that can get pushed. And no matter how much work we've done, personal work, self-awareness, all that, we still have our own shame buttons that can get pushed from time to time. Sometimes it's very obvious if, as we continue to work and grow and learn about ourselves and gain more awareness, we can notice, okay, that shame button was just pushed. Sometimes we don't know what's happening, but we start to feel anxious or we start to feel angry or more tired. But yes, we all have our own shame that we still need to work through. And regardless of where we are kind of on this journey of life, I think every human being is still working towards greater health.
Greater health, and you said shame buttons. So I know that my shame button's being pushed when I feel anxious.
It could be any kind of distress. Anything that you might be feeling could be connected, probably is connected to some kind of deep-rooted belief about yourself. And yeah, I kind of call them shame buttons that's been pushed.
That's good. So Kelly Sevin, shame buttons. TM on that one there.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so we definitely want to trademark it. That's great. I haven't heard that before.
Yeah.
So what are some examples of that? So people watching, they can catch and go, oh, that's my shame button.
Well, it's this is a tough thing to even begin to identify. For all of us, when something happens and we start to feel some kind of distress, there's a story that goes through our mind, initial thoughts that go through our mind.
Story.
Yeah. And sometimes we can identify what those thoughts are and the story is that we're telling ourselves. Sometimes it takes practice to be able to notice in the moment, okay, I've been emotionally hooked, my shame button's been pushed, something's going on. Whether I feel insecure, I feel uncertain, I feel angry, I feel confused, I feel dismissed, something's happening inside. And we start to tell ourselves a story about what's going on. Whether it's, okay, John didn't ask me this question because he thinks that that's not really interesting. And I start to create this story in my mind. And our brains are so hardwired for story. We're meaning-making people. We like story. That our brains actually give us a chemical reward when we create a story. So if you were to not ask me this number one question that we talked about asking in this interview, afterwards I could spin this whole story of why didn't he ask me that question? Was it because I didn't do a good job, or I went off on this bunny trail that totally ruined the whole thing? We can create this whole story around why you didn't ask me some specific question.
Yeah.
And our brains, like I said, are hardwired for story. So it gives us a chemical reward for having created a story. What it doesn't do in that split second is check, is this story true or not true? It just says, Kelly, you've got a story, good job, here's a reward. So all the more, our natural tendency is to believe the story and run with it. So then our behaviors follow that story that we're telling ourselves. So then maybe I feel a little more insecure around you, or I question you, how you think of me as a therapist, and maybe I am short in an email to you, or I don't talk to you as openly at work tomorrow, or something like that. Our behavior then follows that story.
Wow. So when you're saying that, what came to mind, we just covered this earlier in a group. And it was, I create a story, and that creates a feedback loop.
Yes.
And that creates how the other person responds.
Yes.
And then that person creates a story, which creates a feedback loop. And really,
Yes.
it was all about the story itself.
Right.
Instead of something totally different.
Yes.
Wow.
And those two stories interacting together, all coming from our own stuff.
We're co-creating.
Yes. And we just get into this big shame storm.
Wow.
And it's just, we're playing off of each other's stuff.
Shame storm. So we got a couple. We got shame buttons.
Well, shame storm was
okay,
Brene Brown's.
Okay.
Yes.
I like that you're putting it to Brene Brown's work.
Yeah.
So what's going through my mind right now is, how did you learn all this stuff? What's your story? We're gonna use stories.
So, like I said, I fell in love with her TED Talks. Resonated with me personally, and then professionally, I wanted to share it with my clients, and they resonated with it too. And I mean, I wanted to read everything that she had. I watched a lot of her videos. She did a lot of Super Soul Sundays with Oprah, and just really, really dove into her work, and some other shame research as well. And I've just continued to follow her career. And I did the Daring Way training. So I'm a certified Daring Way facilitator, and so I was able to really dive into her curriculum and then use that with the clients. And so it's kind of been this ongoing journey for me, and kind of a parallel personal and professional journey. As I continue to share it with clients, I'm in it. I'm in the work. I'm in the education of it. So it's almost impossible for me not to apply it to myself as I'm helping other clients apply it to themselves. So I continue to do my own work and notice this stuff as I go, and especially story, and noticing when I'm telling myself my own stories and figuring out, okay, so what do I do with it? And that's the biggest step for clients is, so we identify the story and then figure out, okay, so what do I do with it? How do I notice that I'm telling myself a story, check it out, either with myself and say, okay, wait, hold on, this is a shame button that's related to the past. This is a moment where I'm not feeling good enough in my career because it's related back to that A- or that B that I brought home and I got questioned about, something like that. It's related to the past often. And then we can also check it out with people too. And this is something, this phrase I'm about to say is something that Brene Brown talks about, and I've heard in some other arenas as well. The Stake in Leadership program, they have this incorporated in their curriculum too, which I absolutely love. And both curriculums talk about this phrase, the story I'm telling myself is. And so to be able to go to somebody, and for example, using the example of you and I,
right.
If I were to come to you and say, okay, John, the story I'm telling myself is that you didn't ask me that question because you thought I went off on this bunny trail and it was unrelated, and you were frustrated with where I went in the story or in the interview. it's a way for me to check out the story that I'm telling myself in hopefully a non-defensive way for you to be able to hear it. Because my goal is for you to be able to hear, okay, here's what I'm telling myself. This is my interpretation. This is what I'm walking away with. Yeah. But not to then put you on blast or put you on the defense, because I want you to be able to hear what I'm saying and give you a chance to clarify. Yeah, I didn't ask you because we went in this other way, but that was okay. Or, honestly, that totally skipped my mind. We got talking about something else, and that was so great that I didn't even think about that question again. But it gives us a chance to be able to be on the same page.
Yeah, it makes sense. And you're speaking so much to what's in my mind right now. We started, it's like, boom, this is exciting. I'm kind of tracking you a little bit. When you said shame buttons, you had me.
Yeah.
So I went in there. So what are some other things you would like people to hear? What are some other thoughts that are the Kelly Sevin you need to know thoughts?
Oh, man, it can go all kinds of different ways. With this especially, another big word is vulnerability. And that is a key part of any of the work in recovery, in shame resilience, in any of the therapeutic life work. I mean, really, to be human beings, to live life, there's vulnerability involved. And our culture has really kind of erred away from being vulnerable. There's this expectation of being strong and having it all together, and wanting the courage without the vulnerability, but they go hand in hand.
Wait. Wanting the courage without the vulnerability.
Yeah.
So
being brave, taking risks, achieving, but let's not talk about the failures and the vulnerability along the way. Let's just look at the wins, the successes, but every single one of those comes with vulnerability, comes with failure, comes with fear and doubt. But we so focus on the good. At the detriment, and I think for individual people who haven't done some of this work and haven't embraced vulnerability in a healthy way, think, I don't want to take that risk because the fear of failure is so great. But we've got to talk about how failure is part of the road of life. It's absolutely part of the road, and part of every one of our stories has failure. If we choose to show up and engage in relationships and try something new and go for the promotion or have a difficult conversation with our family, or curveballs in life happen, a death in the family, or a health diagnosis, all of that moves us into vulnerability, whether we like it or not. That comes with vulnerability. And along that way, there's going to be the struggle, the pain, the failure. We're not always going to get the promotion that we want, or get the job that we want, or handle a difficult conversation really well. But we still lean into the vulnerability, and we can't get to the successes, the wins, the connection with other people without leaning into that vulnerability. So vulnerability is a big part of this work too.
And it sounds so counterintuitive of what so many motivational speakers at least used to say. When we read the books, it's always kind of the rah-rah. It's always focused on the solution, always move forward, forget about the past, be a positive person.
Yeah.
And I used to try that. Being positive is great, but I used to just try just that, and it never worked for me. And I thought, well, maybe I'm failing. Maybe I can't do that. But what you're saying is, we're getting some free therapy here. What you're saying is that actually you can have both.
Yeah, and it's important that we acknowledge both, because you can't have one without the other. You can have failure all day long without the success, sure, but you can't have the success without the failures along the way too. And I heard, and I don't remember, I can't give credit for this one, I don't remember who said it, but failure is an imperfect word the minute you learn from it. It's probably a Brene Brown thing, but I don't remember.
Okay.
And I love that idea, that failure is an imperfect word the minute you learn from it. It's no longer a failure.
Yeah, so then it's actually something that's a success.
Yeah. It's a learning opportunity, right? It's an opportunity for growth. And I'll tell our clients that too, that relapse. And they're like, I failed, I messed up. And I'm like, hold on, let's learn from this. This doesn't have to just be chalked up to awful, terrible, bad. Let's learn from this and get back up and learn what we need to do different, make some changes, and keep on going.
That's a good statement right there. So when we think about that, make the mistakes, keep on going, and accepting, what are some of the things in general that you might hear from a client? I'm thinking about it because I'm thinking, again, people watching, I always hear the same thing in groups. Now I don't feel so alone. What are some of the things that people bring up that once they share, they no longer feel so alone?
Oh, man. Specific to recovery or just anything in general?
I think anything in general.
Yeah, I mean, it could really be absolutely anything. It could be sharing the details of what they did when they were active in addiction, sharing their fears, sharing the things that that they did that they're not proud of, sharing the things that they didn't do that they wish they had done, sharing about their trauma. That's some of the deepest, most vulnerable work, and also where that sense of empathy is so powerful, to know that we're not alone. Because when we keep those painful things close to us and we don't share it with other people, the stories that we tell ourselves really begin to continue to say, I'm the only one, no one will understand, no one can know this about me, they'll look at me differently. But if I can share that with somebody else at any level of the intensity of those stories and the depth of the hurt and pain, regardless of that, if I can connect with somebody else and that has experienced something similar, even if it's not the exact same context, the exact same experience, the emotion behind it, we all know rejection. We all know fear. It might look differently. Our experiences of rejection might look differently, but we both can relate to each other. And that's the other big piece to this is connection. Shame cannot thrive when there's healthy connection and relationship. It's also the antidote to addiction. I mean, it's really, really healthy relationships is the anti-addiction.
Connection is the antidote to addiction. Can you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah. When we're active in our addiction, when we're stuck in our shame cycles, stuck in the addiction cycle, we're disconnected. We're disconnected from ourselves and we're disconnected from other people. So the first step is we've got to get connected to ourselves. We've got to show up, connect to ourselves, be honest with ourselves, set the mask down, set the shame down, kind of walk into the shame even, acknowledge it. It's kind of like that big monster that we keep running from, hoping we can get away from it, but all the while it's just growing bigger and bigger. But if we turn and face it, acknowledge it, it gets smaller. It takes the power away. So connect to ourselves, and then we're able to connect to other people too. And that's where healthy life, healthy recovery, healthy shame resilience happens.
And is that phrase, connection is the antidote to addiction, is that a Brene Brown or is that a Kelly Sevin?
I don't know. It could, I don't think I've read it. I don't think it's a Brene thing. I might probably just put some of her things together. But over the years, yeah, just that sense of connection absolutely is anti-addiction.
Anti-addiction.
Yeah.
And another soundbite you used before I heard the other day, which was powerful in a meeting, was talking about leaning into it. Correct me if I'm saying it right. Leaning into your greatness. Is that how you said it?
Leaning into the best of us.
Leaning into okay. Can you talk about how do we lean into the best of us?
So we all have good and bad. There's parts of me that I will put on Facebook for the world to see, and there are parts of me that I hope never get on Facebook. I don't want anybody to ever see parts of me, whether it's thoughts I have, bad hair days, things that I've said that were just out of spite and I didn't think them through, things that I've done, I mean, all kinds of things. And so we all have this kind of best of us and worst of us, and when we're in pain and we're struggling, oftentimes that festers and fosters the worst of us. We take out our hurt and pain on other people in some unfortunate cases, and that's a lot of the work that we do with our clients too, because that's a natural tendency. That's what we lean into out of self-protection. But if we can shift and really lean into the best of us and take a minute, pause, check the stories we're telling ourselves, figure out, okay, what am I feeling, what's going on inside of me, and then really leaning to the best of me. I do a lot of work with the clients on values, and to be able to identify, okay, what are my core values, and lean into those. And that's always going to bring me back to the best of me. That's going to bring me back to the road that I want to journey down, whether it's the road of recovery, the road of healthy relationships, my career path that I want to go down. If I can continue to lean into the best of me, continue to lean into my core values, that'll help keeping me in that direction.
You're going back in that direction. And so we talked about this off camera earlier. Sometimes when men lean into the best of them, part of the best of them is a very sensitive side.
Yeah.
And what I've noticed, and I've heard people talk about it, that's almost shocking. I sent my husband or boyfriend to therapy. He's coming back and he's crying in front of me. What are you doing to him?
Yeah, he's got these emotions now.
That's not what I was expecting.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's the vulnerability. And there's, for men and women, shame can kind of present in two different kind of core ways. For women, our shame has to do with body image and self-esteem and stuff like that. For men, it's to not be perceived as weak. Those are kind of the two main gender differences with shame. And so for men, the idea is, if I'm supposed to remain strong, do anything to not be perceived as weak, I cannot lean into vulnerability. Because vulnerability, one of the biggest myths with vulnerability is that it's weakness. Feeling our feelings feels like vulnerability because it is. So then that gets kind of chalked up to that whole idea of I can't do feelings, I can't do emotions, I've got to be strong, I've got to be stoic, I've got to have it all together. So leaning into the best of us, leaning into vulnerability comes with those emotions. And it's a learning kind of dance for men and women in relationships and for anybody in relationship to be able to navigate, if somebody else is kind of learning how to do this vulnerability thing, it does kind of pull the other one, or at least puts up a mirror to the partner of, okay, so I'm being vulnerable. Are you going to be vulnerable with me and at least sit with me in my vulnerability? Because that does draw and kind of pull on your own vulnerability to be able to sit with me. This is a Brene quote. Brene Brown. I don't know her. I probably should call her Brene Brown. She says, vulnerability begets vulnerability. And that's some of the power behind connection too. And so it can be surprising and kind of confusing at first if in a relationship somebody is vulnerable, and it's a new thing, especially somebody coming out of treatment or doing family therapy while in treatment. It can be new for the both partners of the relationship. And so for one person to be vulnerable, it puts up this mirror, and it could invite the other person. Ideally, the other person will be invited into vulnerability as well, and that's where deep connection happens and huge healing for those relationships.
So basically, when one person gets into therapy, everyone around them is invited in a way through the experience.
It might not feel like a gentle invitation at times, but yeah, that's the goal. That's the goal, is that it creates this new vulnerable space for everybody to come into, to lean into. And I like that phrase of lean into. And I did first hear lean into from Brene, and I've just run with that. Is to lean into. It sounds gentle. There's movement. There's action. There's a direction. And it feels more gentle than it actually feels when we're doing it. Or it sounds more gentle, I should say, than sometimes it feels. But to lean into that vulnerability can change the whole family system.
And so people can come and they can learn that from you. They can learn it at Healing Springs. And they can even now learn from you in class.
Yes. So I'm teaching a class at UNT. I'm teaching their undergrad addictions class. I've got 74 students. It's
wow.
Yeah, it's so fun. We talk about mental health. We talk about addiction. It's kind of a survey class. It's an overview. So we're hitting a lot of big main topics with addiction. And just yesterday, we talked about mental health and addiction, which I geek out on hardcore. And so that was really fun. And our midterms next week. So, it's been really fun.
Yeah, they're lucky to have you.
Thank you. It's been good.
Yeah, so as we're starting to come to a close of the show, anything else I've left out as a question that we talked about before that you want to share, a leaving message?
I guess just to encourage everybody that healing happens, and there's resources, there's help out there. Shame says to stay silent, but to heal shame, we've got to step outside of that. Take that step, take that risk. Reach out to somebody that you know, and also with vulnerability, it's on a spectrum. So you don't have to share. I wouldn't recommend sharing your whole story right when you meet somebody. Hi, I'm Kelly. Here's my deepest, darkest secret. Right. But to over time and as trust is built, to share a little bit more and give it that time, give it that space to build, and to share it with people who have earned the right to hear your story, to hear parts of you, to hear your vulnerability, to sit with you, people who have earned the right. That is a Brene phrase, and yeah, I think it just sets up, it is an honor to share that space with someone. And as therapists, it is an honor for us to sit with these people who are coming to us, oftentimes struggling, not in their best place, wanting help, sometimes not wanting help, but most of the time wanting help. Right. But there's something in there that got them to sit in front of them. So there's a part of them that does want, that does want help, that doesn't want to continue the way that they're going. They just don't know how to get out of it, which can happen to any of us. So to find people who earn the right to hear your story. It's a gift that every human being has to offer to other people, should you choose to. But it's got to happen with other people through connection.
It has to be through that connection itself.
Yeah.
So I'm sure a lot of people have learned a tremendous amount from you today. I did. I really enjoyed having you on the show today.
Well, thank you. It was good. I'm glad I got to come and bring Andy, who's laying around here somewhere.
He's here somewhere, but his presence is noticed and seen. So thank you for being on here. And Andy, thank you wherever you are. We appreciate you. So we learned about shame buttons. Be aware of your shame buttons. Learn to lean into your greatness. And we can actually heal by connecting to other human beings. And let me see if I got it right. Connection is the antidote to addiction. Some great leaving thoughts. And we'll see you next time.